June Patterson had just finished her yearly checkup when something unusual happened. As she gathered her purse, her longtime physician, Dr. Alan Pierce, leaned close. His hand trembled slightly as he slipped a folded note deep into her bag. His voice carried a forced calm. "Take care, June, and remember, family isn't always what it seems." The words felt strange, but she left the office quietly, holding her breath. Inside the cab on her way home, she finally reached into her purse. She unfolded the note with hands that shook. The handwriting was sharp, urgent, unlike the steady doctor she had trusted for decades. It said only 4 words. "Don't go home, run." Her chest tightened. She looked out the cab window as Cedar Ridge rolled by, the familiar streets now cloaked in unease. What could he mean? Why so secretive? That night, her life would turn upside down, and those 4 words would become the line between trust and betrayal. June Patterson was not a woman people noticed right away. At 70 years old, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that came from a lifetime of discipline. For over 30 years, she had worked as a school librarian, organizing shelves and guiding students with patience. Her habit of keeping lists, receipts, and neatly labeled folders had stayed with her long after retirement. She had built her life on structure and sacrifice. June and her late husband, Walter, had adopted Eric when he was only 2 years old. He had been a small boy with uncertain eyes, and June had poured every ounce of love into raising him. She worked extra hours, often clipping coupons and sewing clothes by hand, just to make sure Eric never felt less than anyone else. Her fondest memory was reading storybooks aloud to him at night, the rhythm of her voice carrying him to sleep. She believed that love, consistent and steady, would always be enough. But on that Tuesday, June discovered that her steady world was far more fragile than she had ever imagined. When June thought back on that appointment, the details unsettled her. Dr. Alan Pierce had always been steady, calm, and confident. That morning, however, his hands trembled as he adjusted the blood pressure cuff. He avoided her gaze, speaking quickly as though rehearsed. "Everything looks great, June," he said. "Your labs are excellent. Your heart is strong. You have many good years ahead of you." His words should have comforted her, but his tone was strained, almost fearful. She left the office politely, holding her purse tight. It wasn't until she was halfway home in the cab that she dared unfold the paper. The words hit her harder than any diagnosis ever could. "Mrs. Patterson, your family was here yesterday. They asked if I could certify that you are mentally unstable so they could place you in a nursing home. They wanted to know about your assets. I refused. Do not go home. Run, Dr. Pierce." June's breath caught. Her pulse raced as the cab rolled through familiar streets. Her family? Eric, Brittany, Chloe? She tried to push the thought away, but it was impossible. Dr. Pierce had been her physician for years. If he risked everything to warn her, the threat had to be real. By the time June stepped through her front door, her nerves were raw. The living room lights glowed softly, but the air felt heavy. Eric, Brittany, and Chloe sat together, their voices dropping to a whisper as soon as she entered. Brittany quickly tucked a stack of papers behind her back, and Chloe's eyes darted away. "How was your appointment, Mom?" Eric asked, forcing a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Everything's fine," June replied evenly. "The doctor said I'm in perfect health." The silence that followed was telling. Brittany exchanged a glance with Eric, her lips pressed into a thin line. Chloe muttered, "That's great, Grandma," but her voice carried no warmth. Dinner that night was worse. The clink of silverware echoed louder than words. No one looked her in the eye. When June finally asked if something was wrong, Eric answered too quickly, "We're just tired." But June couldn't shake the unease. Later that night, unable to sleep, she crept toward her door when faint voices drifted from the kitchen. She froze, listening. "The doctor wouldn't go along with it," Brittany hissed. "I told him she's confused. Leaves the gas on, forgets names, but he refused." "Then we'll find another doctor," Eric replied coldly. "And if that fails, we move to Plan B." "What's Plan B?" Chloe whispered. Eric's tone hardened. "We make her lose her mind, switch her medications, hide things. Tell her she did what she didn't. In a month, any doctor will certify she's incompetent." June's knees nearly buckled. They weren't just waiting for her to weaken. They were planning to destroy her sanity. June closed her bedroom door and pressed her back against it, her breath unsteady. Betrayal burned through her veins, but alongside the pain, a spark of clarity began to form. If her family thought she was helpless, they had underestimated her. For decades, June had quietly carried a secret. When Walter passed away 10 years earlier, he left her more than just memories. Walter had been cautious, even shrewd with money. Unknown to Eric or Brittany, he had built a safety net beyond the modest home they lived in. Tucked away in a leather-bound notebook in June's dresser drawer was the record of it all. A carefully managed account overseas, a rental duplex in another state, and conservative investments that together totaled well over $2 million. She had never spoken of it, not even to Eric, because she wanted him to build his own life without leaning on her fortune. Now, that hidden legacy was her greatest weapon. While Eric and Brittany schemed to strip her of what they thought was a modest pension and an old house, June carried the knowledge that she was far from powerless. They believed they could corner her, but she was already holding the keys to a future they could never touch. At 5 o'clock the next morning, June sat at her desk with a small suitcase open beside her. She moved quietly, knowing the creak of a floorboard could give her away. She chose only what mattered: her passport, driver's license, social security card, Walter's notebook with the hidden accounts, her prescriptions, and 2 changes of clothes. She slipped the rest of her life back into drawers as though nothing had changed. On the kitchen counter, she left a simple note in her neat handwriting: "Gone to run some errands. Be back later, Mom." She knew Eric and Brittany would see nothing unusual in that. A cab carried her to the bank, where she withdrew $5,000 in cash. The young teller looked at her with curiosity, but June met her eyes steadily. "Personal business," she said, her voice firm. From there she went straight to the Granary Hotel downtown, a discreet place with heavy doors and quiet halls. Her room was on the 10th floor with 2 exits, a lockbox, and a wide view of the city. For the first time in years, June allowed herself to breathe. She pulled out her phone, switched on the recorder, and whispered to herself, "If they want a guardian, they'll find one, but it won't be the kind they expect." June knew she couldn't fight this battle alone. That afternoon, she called Samuel Grant, a respected attorney in Cedar Ridge who specialized in elder law. When she arrived at his office, Samuel greeted her with a firm handshake and a steady gaze. He listened without interrupting as she told him about the note, the whispers, and the plan she had overheard. When she finished, Samuel leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Patterson, what your family is attempting is elder abuse and conspiracy. With proof we can stop them, but we'll need to be methodical." He introduced her to Lena Ortiz, a private investigator with a reputation for thoroughness. Lena's approach was direct. "If they're sloppy, we'll know by tomorrow. And from what you've said, they're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." Together they laid out a strategy. June would undergo evaluations by independent doctors to prove her mental clarity. The bank would be notified to flag suspicious activity. Lena would document every move Eric and Brittany made, every call, every attempt to access her accounts, every item they tried to sell. June signed limited authorizations so her new team could act quickly. For the first time, she felt a shift. They wanted her powerless, but she had just assembled allies who understood power better than her own family ever would. By the end of the week, Lena's reports confirmed June's worst fears. Her family was wasting no time. Brittany had begun listing June's antique furniture on online marketplaces, describing the pieces as estate clear-outs. She had even carried boxes of June's belongings to the car when she thought no one was watching. Eric's behavior was bolder. He marched into June's bank, insisting he needed temporary control of her accounts because his mother was suffering episodes of confusion. The bank manager refused without legal paperwork, but Eric pushed so hard that security had to escort him out. Meanwhile, Lena uncovered 5 active credit cards opened fraudulently in June's name. The charges were staggering: luxury handbags, fine dining, and even a week-long trip Brittany and Chloe had taken to Florida under the pretense of visiting Brittany's ill mother. But the deepest cut came from Chloe. She was telling friends at school that her grandmother had advanced Alzheimer's, borrowing money under the claim it was needed for grandma's medical care. The most shocking discovery, however, was personal. Lena followed Brittany on a Thursday afternoon and photographed her meeting a neighbor, Mark Ellis, at a roadside motel. For 2 years, Brittany had been carrying on an affair while Eric believed she was attending yoga. Each revelation was another knife, but June didn't crumble. She wrote in her logbook with steady hands, "People expose themselves in time. My job is simply to turn on the light." The following Monday, June put her plan in motion. Dressed in a tailored black dress with her pearl necklace, she walked into Richardson Hale Realty, one of the most respected offices in Cedar Ridge. She had arranged a tour of luxury homes, the kind worth more than $1 million. Her agent, Ricky Hale, greeted her warmly. As they were touring a modern property with marble floors and tall windows, June heard familiar voices downstairs. She froze at the top of the staircase. "Good morning," Eric was saying. "We're here to start the process of selling my mother's house. She isn't well, and we have legal authority to manage her affairs." Brittany chimed in quickly. "We don't have the final paperwork yet, but it's just a matter of days. We'd like to move fast." June descended slowly, her heels echoing against the polished stairs. The three of them turned, their faces draining of color. "Interesting," June said evenly, "because I'm here too, not to sell but to buy." The rival agent looked between them, visibly uneasy. Ricky asked gently, "Do you know these people, Mrs. Patterson?" "Yes," June replied, her voice calm. "They're my family, or at least I believed they were." She pulled out her phone and played a recording, Eric's voice cold and unmistakable. "We switch her medications, we hide her things. In a month, any doctor will certify she's incompetent." The room fell silent. The agents exchanged horrified glances. At that moment, two of Samuel Grant's associates entered with a public notary. June smiled softly. "Now, let's make a record of who really has authority here." That evening, back in her hotel suite, June decided silence was no longer protection. She opened her laptop, created an account on a popular livestream platform, and typed a title that was simple and direct: A Grandma's Truth. At first, only a few viewers tuned in. June spoke calmly, explaining how her own son and his family were trying to declare her incompetent. She showed the note from Dr. Pierce. She held up bank alerts, photos of listed furniture, and played short audio clips of whispered kitchen conversations. The numbers climbed quickly, hundreds, then thousands. Comments poured in, words of outrage, encouragement, and stories from other older viewers who had faced similar betrayals. Midway through, her phone buzzed. It was Chloe calling Liv. "Grandma, please stop. You're ruining everything." June leaned closer to the microphone. "Am I ruining your life, Chloe? Or were you ruining mine when you told your friends I had Alzheimer's?" The silence on the other end was deafening. The viewers erupted in the chat, calling for accountability, praising June's courage. She ended the broadcast with steady words. "This isn't just my story. It's a warning. If it happened to me, it can happen to others. Don't ignore the signs." When she logged off, her stream had reached over 5,000 people. The next afternoon, Chloe asked to meet June at the cafe inside the hotel lobby. She arrived looking nothing like the confident teenager June remembered. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair unkempt, her voice trembling. "Grandma, I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I never wanted things to go this far." June folded her hands and waited. Chloe admitted she had repeated her parents' lies, telling friends June had Alzheimer's, even borrowing money in her name. But then her words spilled out faster. She confessed she was pregnant, the father a married man who had already walked away. She feared her parents would blame her if their schemes collapsed. "They've been fighting non-stop since you left," Chloe said, her eyes red. "Dad says it's Mom's fault for being greedy. Mom says it's Dad's gambling. And now they're planning to pin everything on me, the jewelry, the money, all of it." She slid her phone across the table. It contained texts, recordings of arguments, even videos of Brittany counting cash from June's missing belongings. "Please," Chloe said, her voice breaking. "If I testify, will you help me? With school, with my future?" June reached across the table, her voice firm. "Truth has a cost, Chloe. But yes, I'll help you, if you stand on the side of what's right." 3 weeks later, the case of Patterson v. Patterson filled the Cedar Ridge courthouse. The gallery overflowed with reporters, neighbors, and older citizens who had followed June's livestreams. Cameras clicked as June walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, her posture straight, Chloe at her side. The prosecution began with the recordings, Eric's voice plotting to switch medications, Brittany's whisper about selling antiques, Chloe's own cold words agreeing she was tired of pretending to love her grandmother. The jurors leaned forward, their expressions tightening. Then came the evidence of fraud. Credit card statements in June's name showed luxury purchases, the Florida trip, jewelry pawn attempts. Lena Ortiz, the investigator, testified with precision, producing photos of Brittany's affair with Mark Ellis and Eric's repeated visits to doctors begging for a false diagnosis. The most dramatic turn came when Chloe took the stand. She admitted her own mistakes but laid out every detail. Her parents planned to blame her. The recordings she had saved, the fear that drove her to confess. The defense attorney tried to paint her as unreliable, but Chloe held her ground. Support isn't payment, she told the jury. It's what family should be. Finally, June testified. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying the steady tone of a woman who had spent decades reading aloud in libraries. I gave my son 45 years of my life. Love is not a blank check to betray me. After 5 days of testimony, the jury returned in only 2 hours. Eric and Brittany Patterson were found guilty on all counts: conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse, and attempted property theft. The gavel fell. The courtroom erupted not with cheers but with a heavy silence that felt like justice. 6 months later, June unlocked the front door of her new home, a modest cottage on the outskirts of Cedar Ridge. The house wasn't large, but sunlight poured through wide windows, and a small garden stretched out back where roses and tomatoes shared the soil. Chloe lived with her now, finishing high school while preparing for motherhood. She had testified bravely, and though her relationship with her parents was shattered, she was building a new path. June guided her through homework, doctor visits, and long talks about resilience. For June, freedom came in small moments. Brewing tea in her own kitchen, reading aloud in the evenings, even if only to herself. Attending the library's senior circle where she helped others learn to protect their finances and keep their independence. Her old house, once filled with tension, was gone. But here, in a smaller place, June found something far more valuable: peace, dignity, and the start of a life rebuilt on her own terms. June's story was not only about betrayal and justice, but also about the lessons hidden between the cracks. She realized that trust, while precious, must be balanced with preparation. The first lesson was to talk about capacity early. Before problems arise, choose someone trustworthy for power of attorney, and make sure the limits are clear in writing. June learned the hard way that silence can become a weapon against you. She also saw the importance of separating accounts. A daily account for bills, with only what you need, can protect larger savings from sudden misuse. Alerts for unusual spending or new cards can act as quiet alarms. Independent evaluations matter too. A single clean screening from a neutral doctor can prevent false claims later. And records, logs, receipts, and notes are not just paperwork. They become shields when words alone are not believed. Finally, June understood that stepping aside for a few days, checking into a hotel, calling a lawyer, or simply pausing can be the difference between being controlled and taking control. To families who truly care, these measures are not about suspicion, but about clarity. They protect everyone, both the elder and the children. June now tells her circle at the library, kindness is strong, but wisdom makes it safe. It was a lesson earned at great cost, but one that could save others from walking the same path. June Patterson's journey taught her that dignity is not something others can give, it is something you claim each day. She no longer measures her worth by what her family thinks, but by the respect she insists on for herself. Kindness doesn't mean surrender, she often says. It means setting the table where respect is the first place setting. If this story resonates with you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave your thoughts below.